Okay, hearing none, are there any objections to approving the minutes as written? Right, hearing none, the minutes are approved by unanimous consent. Next item is a report from the chair. Really, I don't have anything formal to announce or any correspondence that I've received. Just wanted to make one sort of a comment just to the commission in general. Just a reminder that we all come from varied backgrounds, a wide area, experiences, so on, and just hopefully, not anything in particular, but just a reminder to respect everybody's opinion. We will not always agree, but we do need to maintain a certain decorum and maintain a certain respect. Okay. Next item, public comments. Just a reminder to the public, as I'm looking, I think we have, well, three members, and I'm not sure who's from the press, so, or if more, still the public. All the meetings are live streamed and recorded so that any statements anybody makes will be recorded. If you have, any member of the public would like to make a comment, this is the time. All we ask is you come up to the lectern, give us your name and the street on which you live. All right. Well, thank you very much. No comments from the public. Maybe we'll be out of here by 8 o'clock. Okay. Next item on the agenda is a presentation from the Pennsylvania Economic League. They sent out a few items for us to review, and they're going to provide us a presentation on options, local government options that are currently being considered possibilities across the Commonwealth. So, I don't know, Ms. Morehouse, Mr. Reddick, Mr. Cross, it's all yours.
Okay, I think Patty's going to put on the screen for the live stream.
Yes.
Okay, one point of clarity, though, this is the comprehensive listing of authorized governments for local government in Pennsylvania, excluding Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and Scranton, which are of different classes, and they need not concern our study. Although, if you're interested in their forms of government, all three are home rule forms of government. They all operate under charters, under different taxing authorizations and such. So they are a little bit different. And as you know, under the home rule charter law that we're studying under, a municipality only retains tax authorization for the type of municipality it was, if you do decide to change the nature of government. So you can't not take a Pittsburgh or a Philadelphia or a Scranton-centric tax and apply it to Lancaster. So that's why we didn't include these. But we did include the more common ones, which are the third-class cities, the third-class optional Plan A, which is the first column. That's Lancaster's, as you know. And we have boroughs, second-class townships, first-class townships. And we don't intend to go through all these. This would be, the chairman would not get home in time. We would encourage you to look at these. We have it set up so that you could either print it as Fred did on a letter size, or you could fold it as I do to compare the different forms of government with your own. As a general statement, you'll notice that the cities and boroughs and even first-class townships, as you go through it, are controlled, but not as tightly controlled, in my opinion. There's more local, perhaps more local autonomy or more leeway given in the cities. But the second-class townships are it's a very specific code. It has a lot more controlling aspects from the legislature. It is the most predominant form of government in Pennsylvania. There's 1,400 of them. They have some unique points where elected officials can work for the municipality and be serviced, get raises based on other people's votes. They do have a lower tax rate. You'll see we have in here between elected officials and appointed officials and all those comparisons, et cetera. You'll also find a handy comparison of the taxes that are levied. You'll see that they're sort of uniform except for the real estate. You'll see a lot of stuff that the boroughs can have that the cities don't. Second-class townships have a different category. Your finance operation is obviously different. You'll see how the cities are compared to each other. And I think the last one was, the very last page is last two pages are the sort of the oddball forms allowed. Would you say, Fred, the council manager, commission, legislative, executive? Yeah.
Yeah, those pages 19 and 20 really show the three different basic forms of government structure. You have a council manager form of government where you have an elected body and an appointed manager then who is the administrative officer responsible back to the elected body. And then you have the legislative executive form. That's what Lancaster is currently operating under, where you have a strong executive, a mayor, in the case of Lancaster, and then a council that serves as the legislative body. And then you have the commission form of government, which is basically the elected body. The elected body wears two different, or has two different responsibilities. They are the legislative branch, but they're also the administrative branch. And if we go back to, the first page, just in looking at the current, the five columns, the current governments, the third-class city optional plan is a legislative executive form of government. The third-class city code, though, is a commission form of government where you have five elected individuals serving both a dual role as a legislative and administrative. Boroughs, they're a little bit unique in that they have a legislative council. The mayor in a borough has very limited powers. The mayor is only responsible for the police department and does not have a vote on council, though they can break a tie. Second-class townships operate as a commission form of government, where you have 3 or 5 individuals, again, serving as both a legislative and administrative function, although in many cases the administrative role can be delegated to an administrator or manager. And then you have first-class townships that, again, are a commission form of government with a board of commissioners responsible for the legislative actions. Typically, again, they appoint, in most of the first-class townships, they appoint an administrator or manager to run day-to-day operations. So, again, the three basic forms of government on pages 19 and 20 give you the options that currently exist in a broad sense, and then looking at how Pennsylvania local governments are currently structured on the preceding pages, you can see the powers that different offices have and the responsibilities that different offices have.
So that's the forms of government. When I call them the oddball forms of government, I think there's not one set that fits, and Fred did a good job of explaining that nearly any one of these could have a variety of these forms of government. I think the only third-class city that operates under the optional plan with a manager is Du Bois. It was Altoona and Du Bois, but Altoona changed their form of government about 10 years ago. So as far as cities, there is one other city that operates under the different hybrid legislative mayor. That's Hazleton. They have a different street. Yeah. So most cities are either third-class code, as Fred would call it, the commissioner code, and or third-class option A.
I have a question, if I may. Through all of these, if we were to vote to write a home rule charter, sort of two parts. One is, would we be required to say that there is some form that's currently in use that, well, this is what we would like to do? So right now, we are under, I'm assuming, the third class optional plan A. That's my understanding. But if we wanted to say, well, we want to switch to something else, we could do that?
You could pick, you can, from column A, B, or C, it's a menu. What is, when you're talking about a charter,
Mhm.
one of the ways I looked at this when we were putting it together was the titles, the elected officials, the governing body, the mayor, all those are positions or responsibilities that have to be accounted for in your charter. So there has to be some sort of executive legislative function. There has to be some sort of appointed officials functions. And you would account for those in your charter, but you could pick from existing forms and you would adopt that, or you can develop your own.
And that was going to be my second part. Or is it possible we could just throw the whole thing out and say, we want to create something brand new that nobody has ever tried before, and that as long as
Within reason.
the voters approve it, I mean, that's still a legal possibility.
Yeah, and within reason, I think. You know, I would view it as a hybrid. You know, you are not locked into any one of these forms of government. You could pick and choose. You could have a hybrid type form of government that matches different, across the board, different responsibilities for different offices.
Yeah, when you're, lost my train of thought for a second, I'm sorry. When you're talking about the hybrid part of it, it'll come to me.
I just wanted clarification on whether or not, like it was, like picking from the buffet line, that you can say, you can do this, or under a home rule, you could do this, or you could do this, or if it just says, as long as it meets certain Commonwealth requirements, you're okay.
That's what I was, that was the thought I had.
Yeah. So as a crazy thought, and with all due respect to Her Honor, if we were to say, well, we want a charter that has the mayor, and the mayor is the chief dog catcher, and that is the only responsibility of the mayor, that would be a legal possibility, is all I'm getting at.
Yeah, that would be
Okay.
the executive function.
Yeah, okay.
Remember from the first presentation, home rule charters operate under the assumption if it's not illegal, you can do it. Whereas municipalities operate under the assumption it has to be legal for you to do it first. It has to be authorized for
Dillon's
your
law.
law.
Yeah, Dillon's
So
law.
it's Dillon's law. And the other thing was, the contrary is you can keep what you have.
Well, that was another one I was wondering about. Is it possible, and now, from my understanding, you just said yes, we could say, well, right now, we're under the third-class optional Plan A, and we would like to stay with what is the third-class optional A, but do it as a home rule.
You would
Under
write the
home rule,
charter so that you would cover the same responsibilities, duties, and powers.
Yeah,
But you
keep
wouldn't
everything the
say,
same.
we adopt the third-class optional plan law, because that would, you'd want to at least spell it out in your charter.
Okay.
You know.
Great, thank you.
Just the city of Chester, and I'm not going to use them as a great example, given their fiscal difficulties, but the city of Chester has a home rule charter that is basically the commission form of government. It's the third-class city code. You know, it pretty much parallels the third-class city code, but it is embedded in a home rule charter.
Right, and the township of Plymouth in Luzerne County adopted the second-class township code in probably 80% of it. They changed the term of length of supervisors from a 6-year term to a 4-year term. They instituted the role of manager as a charter level position. And on the other hand, Lackawanna County in 77 went home rule. And the only thing that distinguishes Lackawanna County, except for some name changes, is the minority commissioner has his own or her own solicitor. Because in Pennsylvania counties, 2 members from one party and the third place finisher is the commissioner without legal representation. In Lackawanna County, they have their own solicitor. And other than that, it's very hard to tell the difference. They have row offices, they have commissioners.
And if a municipality were to do that, would they be able to then, 10 years down the line, say, well, we would like to make tweaks, changes to this?
Well, that's under the home rule charter law.
Okay.
You cannot change the form of government. without impaneling another government study commission and under referendum. But the form of government is kind of defined like the number of council people. If you have a mayor, like eliminate the mayor sort of thing. Go from 7 council people to 4. Those are considered changes in government. And it's pretty well spelled out in the act. The other things are gray. You know, Lehigh and Northampton have had a long series of voter amendments to their charter.
I guess that's what I'm asking. It is possible then to make amendments without creating a whole new.
Within the Home Rule Charter law,
Yeah.
the only prohibition is the initial form of government cannot be changed for 5 years following its adoption. You have to give the baby 5 years to progress. So you can't immediately go in with a government study commission and to change that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
So may I clarify the last statement you just made? It wouldn't be able to be changed within 5 years, and it would take another Home Rule Study Commission to do that.
Change the form of government, yes, at all times. You have to impanel another government study commission, which would then examine whether the charter itself is efficient and effective, and then make changes to the charter. And that goes back to the public.
Okay.
See, once you're in home rule, you are in home rule. If you really wanted to look at the home rule charter, there's a county form of government in home rule charter, which is identical to the regular county form of government. That's in there, so if a county wanted to go back to the commissioner form of government, they could go back, but they would still be home rule. So they'd still operate under the assumption, if it's not illegal, they can do it. It broadens their power, their scope of authority.
Thank you.
Right? Once you check in, you're in.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Sorry. Are there questions? Mr. Feldman, yes.
Thank you. The comparison chart's very interesting. I'm looking at the comparison chart for finances, and this is very helpful. I like to be able to see where we stack up, or at least can make comparisons to similarly situated cities. So I'm looking at Bethlehem, which I personally believe to be a very similar city in many respects.
Oh, that one.
And I see we have 2021 real estate tax. I'm assuming, is that like total receivables?
No, that's what they collected in the year.
Okay, yeah, it's the total amount of money they brought in. But I'm looking at the 2021 EIT resident rate. Is that like a rate per resident? Can you explain the column headers for real estate EIT and 2021 resident EIT rate, please?
It's not going on. So on the resident EIT rate, that's what their municipal rate is. If they're not home rule, then they've got to be at the 0.5%. So that's what that is. And what we wanted to see was the real estate to EIT is just the amount of real estate taxes they bring in compared to what their EIT brings in. And like when it gets closer, well, Lancaster brings in more than four times as much in real estate taxes they do in EIT. And some of the home rule ones, Altoona City is even right now. They bring in as much in the EIT as they do in real estate taxes. So it just gives you that flexibility of where you want to get the revenues to pay for your services.
So it sounds like a good rule of thumb in using this chart too is that if you see over, I should say 0.6, because I remember you explaining previously, we can get the extra 0.1%.
Right.
Basically, if you're over 0.6, it's a home rule city or form of government. That's what you can look at here and tell what's going on if you're trying to make comparisons.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much.
This population
How is it?
And the parameters we did, okay?
Okay.
Because you could have higher than the 0.5 by having referendum, which Lancaster had. Other towns have had the referendum to get rid of Act 20, occupational tax, the open space tax. So you don't have to be home rule always to have a higher.
Right, and I think Bethlehem's on there, did they have a 205 tax for pensions? Is
Yeah,
that
so there are some taxes that
for
skew this.
distressed?
What,
Yeah, so how did Bethlehem get to 1 if they're not a home rule?
they have a distressed pension.
Okay.
So and that's also a non-resident tax, but that's unique to the pension law.
Okay, and Pennsylvania privileges those cities with a distressed pension with the ability to raise more revenue to cover their pension
Yes.
costs, presumably.
Yes.
And the money used for the pension the money raised as a result of Act 205, is that what it was? Can only be used for the purpose of satisfying the pension
Right.
obligations.
And it, as we said, it's for a distress pension fund. It's not for a regular pension payment that you would make. You'd be obligated to make your minimum municipal obligation, but it's only those municipalities that are in the distress program that their fund ratio is below 80%, I believe it is.
The other interesting thing about this chart, if you can look at the differences in the financial structures of different classes of municipalities in Pennsylvania. If you look at the second-class townships, you're going to see the ratio of EIT to be, in some cases, it's where is that one? Middletown is 1. If they bring in the same amount of money. The rate is not higher, but that's a function of the demographics of second-class townships in the last 40 years. They've had a large influx of citizens, as you know, from Lancaster County experience. And those tend to be higher income and lower property taxes. So
Well, even if you just look at Manheim Township
Manheim
right here,
itself, right here.
right, they're pretty much even, their real estate and their EIT.
So one and one.
This list that we put together, the criteria was we Googled, or not Googled, well, pretty much Googled, municipalities between 40,000 and I believe 80,000 to come up with comparable cities. These were just ones that we had picked, different classes of municipalities, and some home rule, some not home rule. If there's any other municipalities that you might want to look at, we can provide the information for them if you think we missed somebody here.
Put this list together as options that you may want to pick certain municipalities off of this list, or again, as Patty said, even adding others, but that you may want to interview, you may want to go out and visit. As we said, there's a combination of home rule and normal borough, township, city government that are represented here. The 2 municipalities that have 0 for the EIT, that's because of the impact the Sterling Act has in the Philadelphia region. And because of the Sterling Act, which the city of Philadelphia imposes, it's not productive for those municipalities to levy an EIT.
I'm just continuing through this really interesting chart, and I'm looking at the police fire section, which is just the next one, and you can see the police expenditures are pretty comparable, it seems, and we talked about that last time. The fire expenditures seem like really high compared to everybody else, and I don't know what the root of that is, but it's interesting. It certainly stands out to me, and I don't know if anybody knows what that might be.
I was surprised to see how many of the fire departments were all volunteer.
That's a good
That's-
point, thank you.
And a number of them are part-time.
A full-time fire is the exception in Pennsylvania. Forget it, there's not that many.
Not many.
It's under
No.
100.
No.
It might be under 60 full-time. I think only one.
But you do see it in urban cores,
Yeah, it's,
in cities, in boroughs.
Well, again, Bethlehem, very similar, also paid, also full-time, half the cost. I don't know if it's good, bad, or otherwise. Our fire service seems to do just a fine job and got nothing bad to say about them, but it just pops out on the page.
It does.
I'm just looking through this, 'cause I didn't even notice that. When I looked over this the other day, I do notice that every city listed has either a paid or a hybrid fire department. All the pure volunteer ones are, unless I'm misreading this, are all townships, although they do have comparable size. Just an observation, am I correct in that?
Say that?
No.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just saying, is, the observation I had, based on what Mr. Feldman just brought up, about paid or volunteer, and just the cost, and yes, outside of Scranton, it does kind of jump out, even if it wasn't bold-faced.
I would say there could be, when I'm looking at Bethlehem, just overall, it doesn't look like they include their benefits in their fire expenses or their police expenses, because I'm looking, they have 154 policemen, but yet their
Yeah.
police costs are less
Yeah,
than yours. So I would caution that maybe their benefits and/or pensions are not included in the police. People report things different ways.
Yeah.
So
I-
if they put their employee benefits in a separate category,
I compliment you on the analysis, but
yes.
this was not put together to be a qualitative comparison. These are self-reported financial numbers from the Commonwealth. The city reports these. As Patty said, Lancaster could very easily include their pension expense in the departments. We didn't go that deep because we'd have to go that deep for everyone. As Patty said, Bethlehem has an Act 205. They might simply pull the pension expenses out and only include the MMO under a general fund. So it isn't designed for you to say, well, we spend twice as much as Bethlehem, there's something going on in Lancaster. It's simply to point out that the level of services in the comparables, you want to look at cities or townships or boroughs that are similar to you, which means they have fire, they have a number of firemen, or they have volunteers, that's all. But I don't know that the level or type of services is a legitimate area for the charter to even go into, because it's a legislative function. The provision of services at that level is a legislative function.
Right.
Uh,
This would be for us to help us identify who we want to talk to and get information.
Yes,
One of the things that I noticed to change the topic, that on the taxes page, and I don't know if this is the same, what you just said about fire also relates to this, but the cities that are home rule, cities, not townships or boroughs, they're, the real estate and the EIT, they're kind of balanced out. It's not lopsided. And so that was the first thing that bumped out to me, is because that you see the cities that do not have home rule, like Bethlehem, and they're as lopsided as we are in terms of where the money is, the amount of money they're getting from those two different areas, not the whatever,
that's the
two
local,
other columns, the ratio, which
yeah.
as a non-math person, I found confusing.
Well, that's the local option in action. That's the ability to design your tax base based on how you want your money to come in. So, Wilkes-Barre has a very, very high EIT rate. I think Patty pays 3% or something.
3%.
But they have a very poor assessment base. So their council and mayor budget on income taxes. And that's why they have a greater amount of income taxes coming in from Wilkes-Barre than property. They have a very old assessment base, so their property taxes are not very productive. But the city has its own assessment office. So that's another policy choice they made. So these all reflect the different choices, and I think Amy's right. The ones that are strong by, limited by legislative action, the codes, show a disparity there. And that would be based on the value of real estate, the value of earned income, that kind of stuff. As opposed to, they can't set the balance. It is what it is.
And I would caution on the LST, if you look at Harrisburg, they have a special LST because they were in distressed status, as well as Scranton also has higher LST. They are triple the EIT, or LST rate.
And those are legislatively authorized exclusively to those
To
entities.
those municipalities.
Well, the increases are, everybody has the $47 available for them.
But only Harrisburg has the legal authority to get more than
And
like the
Scranton.
double or whatever it is.
Harrisburg, Scranton, and if you're in Act 47 distress, you can get a higher LST, but that limits your EIT.
But not on non-resident.
Right.
So the non-resident fence is still up. The legislature does not want you taxing citizens unless you have special authorization such as pensions. And as Patty said, Act 47. The LST rate is a good way to look at the employment center of the area. Rule of thumb, except for the two that Patty mentioned, Scranton and Harrisburg, which both have $152 or something, $151 rates. You can do quick math and see how many people are employed in those towns. Dividing those numbers by $47 roughly, because there's income exclusions and other things. And the mayor of York was always proud of saying, there's a lot of good jobs in the city of York. The people that work there don't live in York. And the LST was an attempt by the legislature to bring in money from commuters.
Did you say that the Act 205 funds are the only legislative authorization for taxing authority in which you actually can collect proceeds from non-residents?
And Act 47.
In Act 47?
Under the two of them.
And?
Act 47, Act 205, right, Fred? But built into the EIT tax is an automatic non-resident tax.
Yeah.
Okay? It's just that the arms race of taxation, everybody's at 1%. So chances, not everybody, 90-some% of the municipalities are at 1%. So if you live in your hometown and it levies 1%, you get a credit for that if you work in another town. So it balances off. But as Fred said, in parts of Philadelphia suburbs, in parts of Pike County and Wayne up by the New Jersey, New York border, many of those, and they're rural, many of those don't have earned income taxes. So those people, if they lived in a city like Allentown or they commuted to Scranton, they pay the non-resident tax to Scranton. But it's still capped at 1%.
Okay. This,
Either, right? Yeah.
well, I feel like I know the answer to this, but I will ask it because you deal with a lot of cities in Act 47, and I assume Act 205 too. We benefit by not being on those statuses because we have, I'm assuming, a higher bond rating and can borrow money on the market better or something. But I know Pennsylvania basically is like you're either distressed and you get all this stuff to deal with being distressed, or you're not and you don't get anything at all. And hearing these different taxing authorities, might make you think, well, is there some benefit to underfunding your pension and kind of finding your way into Act 47? I don't truly believe that, but do you know what I mean? Like, it feels weird.
You have just described local government taxation in Pennsylvania. If you're devious, yeah, I know towns that have done that, purposely underfunded things to take advantage of that. But at some point, they're funded, and you have to get rid of that tax authority.
There are, limitations. No one wants to be considered Act 47. No one wants to go down that rabbit hole of distress. It does have an impact in the financial community and borrowing, and as you said, Carl, in terms of bond ratings and the ability to go into the marketplace. But it's even more than that. It's, a community, well, first of all, the state does not encourage communities to go into Act 47. They have a number of tools to assist communities that are dealing with certain fiscal issues to try to avoid an Act 47 status. Act 47 is a worst-case situation, and there have not been, in the scheme of things, there have only been approximately 30 municipalities that have been designated as distressed over the lifespan of Act 47, and that's out of 2,500 municipalities statewide. Likewise, with the Act 205 program, there is a requirement that you fund under Act 205 your minimum municipal obligation, and that you have actuarial studies done to determine the fund ratio, and that is the ratio of assets to liabilities. The target is to have a 100% fund ratio. Certainly, if you're above that, all the better. The Act 205 provisions don't really kick in. There are certain gradations of distress, but they don't kick in until you're below 90% funded. And there, again, are only a handful of municipalities that have fallen, into that category of distressed pension fund. So neither Act 47 nor Act 205 are intended to really be a safe haven for municipalities to fall under. The goal is to not be Act 47, to not be distressed under Act 205.
We could provide you with a list of the Act 205 taxes in Pennsylvania. I have that somewhere on our we have that list, if that would be useful. I don't think you draw any conclusions from it. It's just based on their pension.
We can pull, the Auditor General's office has a listing they update it on an annual basis based on the actuarial reports that are submitted. And I look at that on a fairly regular basis to see what fund ratios of municipalities have dropped in terms of their fund ratio. But that information is available, and we can provide it if you'd like.
Yeah. I mean, if that's the kind of stuff that you want to see on this same number of towns, that's an easy pull.
It's not, you don't want to get to the point where you need Act 47 or Act 205. You want to be able to, and you guys are taking the steps to do what you need to do beforehand.
Yeah, and for the purposes of your work, right? For the purposes of your work, it's not a indicator. Scranton has been home rule since 76. They were in Act 47 since 92. They were in for 30 years. Johnstown was home rule since, I think, the early 80s or maybe, they were in Act 40, early 90s. They were in Act 47 for a long time.
Pittsburgh is home rule.
Pittsburgh.
They were
Philly's home rule.
Yeah.
There's no correlation there, okay? But it's good for your information to understand how the system that you're currently operating under might not be beneficial for all forms of government or for all situations across Pennsylvania. But whether or not you're distressed, I don't know that the charter would have any, other than a good government clause saying the pension will be fully funded, our employees will be paid, we'll pay our debt on time, and that's, everybody's doing that. And 205 is Uniform Act, so they're not going to be able to go against it anyway.
Right.
See, this stuff is fun, right?
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Whether it's fun,
I know.
yeah.
My friends tell me that. Yeah, your sense of fun is.
Are there any other questions for PEL at this point? I assume this is you don't have additional, that was my understanding.
This is information for you, and we're developing it as you need it, and it's based on the work plan, so.
Does anybody else have any questions on their options for local government for PEL?
And if there are municipalities that you want other analysis like this, we'll just add it to it. Because this is sort of like the population comparables, but if there's a town you think in Lancaster or the surrounding counties that regardless of its population, you think has something that we can look at, when you do your comparable municipalities, let us know. We'll plug them in.
I think, although Patty indicated the population range here from 40 to 80, we did also include the borough of Carlisle. The reason for that is that they are a relatively new home rule municipality, even though they are smaller in population. It's been only within the last 5 years that they went home rule. And you might note that, their ratio of real estate DIT, 2.2, a little bit lower, about half of what Lancaster is, but still, nevertheless, that is a ratio that's dealing with that balance or imbalance, if you will, between the real estate tax and the EIT.
Did any home rule entities not change their EIT? It looks like maybe Carlisle didn't.
At this point, Carlisle has not.
Yeah.
Okay.
At this point, they have not.
Everybody else seems to have done
Well, on
that.
this list, on this list.
On this list,
There
yeah.
are home rules that,
I guess there's some townships that haven't either.
yeah, there's, St. Mary's has been home rule for a long time, 20 years, no, 30 years, and they're half of 1%, out in Elk County, they're a merger, so they have a lot of property to tax. They don't see a need to tax income because they have growing property values. They've merged the township and a borough, it's very big, they say it's the biggest in square miles in Pennsylvania, they're the biggest city in Pennsylvania, they like to say, but they have 0.5%. So and I could probably find a bunch more home rules that, as I said, it's an indicator of the optionality under home rule, the flexibility under home rule. It's not the destination, right? You're not fated to always have higher rates, but you are fated to have flexibility in determining how you want to spread that burden.
I think the flexibility is very important, but you need to look at what makes up your tax base to determine what is the best mix of taxes, given the tax base that you have from the real estate standpoint, commercial, industrial, residential, and then looking at employment. You need to really delve into what makes up the tax base to determine what is the best mix. Home rule gives you the flexibility then to determine what that blend may be in terms of the two basic taxes of real estate and earned income.
So indicators for you to look at whether the system in Lancaster is efficient or effective would be the amount of real estate amount of real estate value subject to taxation versus the amount not subject to taxation. The old nonprofit argument versus for-profit and taxable and tax-exempt properties, that argument. You'll see that cities proportionally have a higher amount because they were the urban centers. They were the centers of not-for-profit activities. As Fred said, the demographics, very important. Williamsport for years brought in more on LST than they did on earned income tax. And I know Fred and I used to tease, Fred couldn't believe it when I pointed out to him, there's more wealth, tax wealth in Williamsport from people that come to work in Williamsport than is generated by the citizens' income of Williamsport. Now, this is pre-Marcellus Shale, so I think that might have flipped a little bit. But my point being, depending on your ability to pay a tax, is you want to be able to levy a tax, as opposed to saying, I can only levy this tax. And if your property tax base is 40% exempt, so is that system efficient and effective? Whereas in a township, it could be all taxable with one or two little churches.
So all of that you just talked about, are you going to give us that research?
For Lancaster City?
Yeah,
We
you
could do it
just
for
talked
Lancaster
about,
City. I wouldn't want to do it for all the rest. There's not a lot of point in it.
when you say all that, I just wonder, well, what is the mix right now? And then what would a balanced mix look like?
Good question. We'd have to call the assessor's office and simply ask or look it up for the taxable and non-taxable. determine the percentage, and then you would look at renters versus homeowners, owner occupied.
Yeah, I think it would be interesting
do
to
that?
see that, and I understand, gathering that information for all of these municipalities might be difficult.
Yeah.
But I would request if we could just even get some of the other cities to understand that, and even if it's just limited to some of the comparable cities right around us. Because I think that would be an interesting analysis, and
Then you're talking renter, occupied versus
We have
renter occupied, which is on,
the housing, we
housing.
have the housing on the
yeah, I
last
think
page.
that's really helpful, just to see the housing and the rental units, but I think that taxable versus non-taxable.
I'm waiting.
Right.
Conversely, to what Amy said, and to your point about these numbers in the fire and police list, some include pensions or benefits and some don't.
Yeah,
So it's hard to we're not comparing apples to apples in that
not quite
circumstance.
comparing apples to apples, but just the fact that you can see how much they're spending on even if they're only capturing the salaries, it is a significant number when there's full-time police, when there's full-time fire. Just based on the salary number, it's bigger.
I feel like I would like to see comparable cities
Okay.
with like those populations that are comparable and like Lancaster that are paid and full-time. Can we see if it includes benefits? Because benefits can be
see
extraordinarily high
Yes.
in addition
Yes.
to salary, yes.
Yeah.
So I think I would like to see that information.
I will see
See what we can come up with, 'cause that's-
see what I can gather.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be.
Sometimes it's not as clear as that. More than likely, I would have to pull the benefits out rather than put them in.
And is that not something that a city would be willing to provide if requested? Simple as that?
Well,
The information is self-reported by the municipality, so municipalities may code things differently from one municipality to another. That's why it's a challenge to try to equate apples to apples completely.
Right, and it depends on how they pay their bill. For example, if they get the Blue Cross bill in and just code it to employee benefits, they would have to do additional work to, allocate out to police, to fire, to administration. So they may or may not be willing to do that.
Yeah.
So do we even know if the numbers for Lancaster City include benefits or not?
They do.
They do. So that was a simple answer right there. I wonder how simple it might be for asking another city that's comparable to Lancaster.
well, I would ask, to what end, though? To what end are we asking that information? Not to be,
Yeah,
but to be devil's advocate here,
understand, yeah.
because I'll explain why. One of the uniform acts that you are subject to, regardless of your home rule status, is Act 111, which is the uniform police non-binding arbitration law. Police and firemen gave up the right to strike, and the voters gave arbitrators the right to order elected officials to fund labor agreements. It's called Act 111 arbitration. You cannot not have Act 111. You are required for uniform. So because of that, it makes it very difficult to compare across the different towns, but it also makes it kind of a non-entity for your study. You cannot get away from that. It isn't something we can build into a charter. You can't limit under a charter what an arbitrator could award or what negotiating power the mayor or the council would have in labor relations for uniform, and to a certain extent, non-uniform.
I get your point.
You see what I mean? So,
Yeah,
yeah,
something
we
to
could,
think
we'll give you data.
Yeah,
I don't know how good it's gonna be, for
Yeah.
your ultimate work,
yeah.
which is to study the efficiency and effectiveness of Lancaster County's.
Well, I understand
Lancaster
what you're
City.
saying to that
Correct.
point now. I understand what you're saying to that point now, so I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
it would be interesting to know.
Yeah. The flexibility that you can gain by abandoning the third-class city code, I agree, that's something, that's almost at the heart of your discussions here. You know, is this form of government reflective enough of the needs of the citizens to provide it without change? And if it isn't, what are we going to change?
Are there any other questions for PEL? All right, great. Thank you very much. I will ask that, and I assume this offer has been there, if any of us should have questions about what we discussed this evening, they are free to contact you and you will, you know, just continuing with this, so you will be available.
Everyone?
Okay. So, you know, I'm one of those who think of all my questions about 3 o'clock the next morning, staring at the ceiling. So, okay, thank you. Moving on, the next item on the agenda is about public input meetings. We had discussed this off and on for the last couple of months. There was, I with Mr. Harris, actually found spots that this was a possibility. The question is, there for September 20th was a date that it was just decided. The question comes down, the discussion is how we proceed. Should we proceed? Are there alternatives? Now, the idea was that the suggestion request was made that we set up meetings outside of city council chambers, just to allow the public to come in and give their opinions on whether we should have home rule, whether we shouldn't, what's right, what's wrong, and so on. So I'm just leave this open. I will say that if we wanted to do something like this on September 20th, I was told that is a possibility. Ebenezer Baptist Church would be available. I'm not saying we have agreed to that or we will do it, but it is a possibility. It's up to the commission as to, do they want to do something like this? Do they want to do something completely different? They want to do nothing at all. So yes, Mr. Feldman.
What's the deadline for noticing of a meeting, just so we know and when we think about doing some kind of additional meeting?
For advertising?
Yeah, we have an advertising
Mr.
requirement.
Harris,
I think it's a week.
1 week?
1 week, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think Brian, your question around all this is valid. It's like, to what end are we going to accomplish this? I mean, and I think that there's a practical end and there's an emotional end. And I want to make sure that we're talking about both of these. And because it doesn't seem as though there's a practical end at this moment, that there's necessarily enough even knowledge about any of this that the citizens can input into that. I think there's potentially a strong emotional end just to keep a connection with the constituency. And I guess I'm not particularly interested in just sitting and having a bunch of people without any knowledge tell us
That's
not
why
a whole lot of
we're
anything. So
discussing.
I mean, and I'm just trying to understand, what that, how we can frame it in a way that is useful.
Ms. Byrd, you had a
Yeah, I think that the community meetings are going to be very important. One, emotionally, because if we do decide that we want a home rule charter, we're going to need their vote. And that means we're going to need their trust. And that means we're going to have to deal with their emotional aspect when they get out there to go vote. So I don't think we can eliminate that. Number two, I do not believe that they do have enough information. I would hope that our meeting would be to give them information. What have we found out thus far? I mean, we know that we're putting it on the website, but we also know there are very few people that I talk to, especially in my community, that is engaged in looking that up and reading that. I mean, we come here once a month and we look at this information and data, and it takes a lot of time. I don't see a lot of people putting the time in to figure. I think we should have meetings to explain to them where we are, where we're going, what questions do they have that we can get for them, not so much just to hear them just ask, but they might want to know things that are happening within the government, how our taxes are, why are we keep raising the taxes, and that we have answers. Because we're here because we keep raising taxes and people don't want to be there, and we're in this position where we're in right now. And yes, we do need to have meetings with the public. I don't think it's a meeting where they just come in and go off emotionally, but I do think it's a meeting that we could get information from them. What type of things do they want to know that we found out so far? We've been in this since when? And we have how many more months to go to come up, and without making a connection? I think these meetings are very important. And I mean, and we can also tell them we're learning. We're not going in there saying we're experts on what we've got so far, but I don't think we exclude them from being able to ask questions and being able to provide that to them.
Ms. Cook?
Yes, I think very similar to that. I think just because folks do not come and attend in person or online, I think going out to the community members where there are questions and they have no idea what we're learning if they're not watching this. I think to see our faces in every quadrant of the city and have our own agenda to say exactly what Ms. Byrd is saying, that this is what we've learned thus far, this is what we're considering, this is what we're talking about. And we still have decisions to make and we're still learning, or something to that effect. Not necessarily to get everybody's input at a community meeting, because that could be very broad and very chaotic perhaps. But I do agree that we could go with an agenda to the people with just that, what we've learned in these few months about taxes, about tax rates, about home rule in general, and the other cities that have it in our comparison to that. So I think it's worthwhile definitely to consider.
Now, Mr. Foreman, just to say, I have spoken with Mr. Cross and PEL, and they are willing to provide a 10, 15-minute presentation if we choose to go out and do this, and that may satisfy a lot. I, for one, will tell you, I have been listening to these for July, August, and now September. I have learned an amazing amount, and I would be terrified if somebody told me that I was now an expert on this. But I would just acknowledge that PEL did say that they would be willing to come in and provide such a thing, which may be useful. Mr. Feldman, you had a comment.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you kind of laying out what you see as the vision for this, because I too had been wondering, like, what would a constructive and meaningful kind of additional public engagement session be beyond these meetings, which are of course public and available to everybody. And so, yeah, PEL putting a presentation together to describe kind of the high points of what we learned, I think that sounds like what you described, because I think you're right. Like, people do ask, like, oh, okay, why did taxes go up, that kind of thing. And in the last meeting, the chart was like, there's your answer, why do taxes go up? And, you know, do people find it satisfying or not? I don't know. But the answer is there. And so something that's structured around what have we learned, the question of what have we learned so far, and providing that to folks, I could definitely see the value in that. And just keeping it focused on that, keeping it short, keeping it, presenting what we learned, and, thanks for coming, close it down, and if you want to talk more, we're here. Something maybe in that line. I will say the 20th is like a week and a half away, so I don't know if that's actually doable, but generally speaking, something like that seems right to me, as long as it's, before I think we were tossing around the idea, saying words like town hall and forum and things like that, but it's not really that. It's like, at this stage, what can we do? We can share the knowledge we've acquired. I guess that's kind of how it's starting to feel to me.
Okay, I don't know, Ms. Rufo or Ms. Lai?
I agree with that. I think when I saw the public input meetings, it kind of gave me the connotation that maybe this is going to be an opportunity for people to voice, and that it may turn into something where we may not expect. And I think it's a great idea. I think it's needed. I think definitely the public should have this information. I just think that this meeting should be very structured.
I'd like to, I'm sorry, Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest, is that it's important to have these public engagements, but the meetings have, whatever it is, has to be structured, and I was just going to ask, who's going to create the presentation? So, because I don't think any of us, I think that would be challenging for us as a commission to try and create the presentation, so it's helpful to know that you all would be willing to do something like that, because then we have a framework for everyone in the room is talking about the same thing. I would caution that doing something a week and a half is going to be challenging to get people in the room. It takes a lot to get people to come to meetings and participate. I did a lot of community engagement at an art museum to get people to come and participate in events with artists that were beneficial to the community, took agreements with 10 different community organizations. We held meetings, we went door to door. It takes a lot of effort. So a week and a half, if there's a neighborhood and people know that folks will come and show up to Ebenezer, great, let's do it. But it would be kind of disappointing, I think, if we show up and nobody's there.
I would like to add to that, Amy, that I think perhaps we should schedule 4 or so meetings at one time in advance. So if we're talking about the end of September, how about we talk about October and talk about 4 different areas, or however many we determine, so that we can get the word out there. And the other thing about being there in person is perhaps to print for everyone in attendance a QR code that takes them right to the link for watching on YouTube, or for the meeting information to come. These are our dates that we meet, something like that, something simple like that to hand out at that meeting.
I will add that I'm sorry, okay. Yes, the public. Yes, officially, do you have to give your name and the street on which you live?
Good evening, Mayor Sirachi. Welcome. Good to see all of you here. If I could just chime in with another suggestion to follow on to this conversation, would be to maybe think about the milestones in which you want to do public engagement. And so, as you're thinking about rolling out 4 meetings now, then there'd be a little bit of a hiatus around the holidays. Thanksgiving, Christmas, and then when you want to think about your next round of engagement, because there is not going to be just one time, because there will ultimately be a conclusion from this body, and to think about the sequence of the community events that you want to have, so that you're intentional about the milestones in which you're reaching out to the public, what you want to say, and then when you want to say it. That's my only suggestion, is that you actually just think about it just a little bit, another step further for when you want to do the next round.
Great, thank you, Your Honor. I receive a fair amount of messages. There was 3 other suggestions. One actually was very similar, was that we should be looking not in September, but further on, and trying to keep them close to each other. My concern with that, I'm not opposed to it. My only concern is if we try to have 4 meetings like that, we will burn out all of us. Being at these doing this night after night after night, for a week. But spreading that out, I'm perfectly fine with that. The September 20th was it's a date that came up as we have available, and it keeps the continuity. I'm not wedded to the date personally at all. That was one suggestion which matches with Ms. Cook's very well. Second suggestion was the city has a website, engagement.city Lancaster. Engage Lancaster. I will confess my ignorance that today's Thursday, before Tuesday, I did not know that existed. Yes, you can see. I'm a technical person, and I still feel like a dinosaur. The suggestion that was made was that perhaps we could start this process before we have the public engagement or public input, public engagement meetings, with creating some sort of my understanding as a statistician, it's a fairly non-scientific poll, but at least it would be a process of getting some feedback. That was one suggestion that was made to me just 2 days ago. The other one was the ideas that F&M has presented, that they do professional focus groups, public engagement, and so on. I don't know if Ms. Rufa has been in contact with that. I have spoken with Professor Medvik and Mr. Yost, and I'm not sure if Ms. Rufa provided all of us a write-up that they gave to her about these ideas. I don't know if we've had a chance to really read through them. Is there anything you'd like to add or suggest on that?
I only wanted to give it to all of us so we all had a baseline description of what they were, so we could have an informed conversation. But I personally think if there's anything we could do, it would be to do a survey, because we're asking elected officials questions. It seems like it would be nice to ask the citizens questions, but we would likely have to find the money for that. So I don't know how possible that is, and I think we should maybe start with these meetings and then see how we feel about it afterwards.
So when these meetings, do you mean the meetings we currently are having or the meetings, public engagement?
Excuse me, I did have a thought on that. One of our other home rule commissions that we're working with, they found they got their best responses when they were out at community events that were happening, like if members of the commission were at a street fair or something like that, where they could talk to. And I did, and just building on what you said, if you had a QR code that said, here's what we're doing, here's what we're up to. They also did surveys and found that they got more responses when they were out in the public saying, here, scan this QR code and take our survey.
Yeah, I want to clarify, when I say survey, I don't mean a Google form. I mean a scientifically organized survey so that the people that you're asking questions are representative of the city socioeconomically, racially, education, et cetera.
Not Survey Monkey. Yes.
I was thinking about what you just said, actually, though, and that's also a pretty good way to do it. Like, we could get a table at the Brightside Fall Fest. We could get a table at the Hispanic Heritage Festival. It's going to happen. Obviously, we have to be there, and we have to develop materials to have on hand. But I think that accomplishes a similar goal. And while I, too, would like a scientifically significant survey, we could maybe do something more simple, just to have on hand. Again, there's a coordination problem here, as in we have to coordinate it, but
Yes.
that becomes a whole lot easier, I think, than figuring out what works. And then the other point is, if you want to do these events in the various places, I just don't think every member needs to be present either. So we could just throw dates on a calendar and call it a day. and try and make that work. And just as long as PEL is able to do it and present, then it works.
May I also add to the commissioners that,
Make the presentation for them to present.
is it beneficial and advantageous for us to communicate with the Director of Community Outreach to kind of coordinate some dates?
I just want to say, I did talk to Amy, and I did like the idea of having someone come up with a means, and I think you gave us different ways that we could have public input. I think it's worth investigating some. I'm definitely supporting public meetings. I also think that Lancaster Engage, I would really want to see the statistics of the people that either we do this survey through FNM, or if we're doing Engage, what percentage of the people are from what parts of the city? What are our demographics as long as race, age? I mean, just to put Engage out there, we know in some areas of the city that does not work.
Yeah, that's
So
what-
I would want to know that we got the demographics about, who responded, and not just a number and say, oh, we got 3,000 people that responded, but they may not even live in the city. And I mean, so I would want to know, if we're going to do that we would also be able to get them statistics,
Are you talking about a survey?
the engagement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The cities engage or the survey from FNM?
Well, both, I think we would need to know that,
So
we-
FNM, what FNM would do is exactly what you're talking about, and that's why it would cost money, because
Yes.
they would take the time to identify the people they're going to call, so that it was a broad swath based, and they would give us a proposal, and they would outline all of that information. But it's, it's not cheap.
Is it possible that they would provide it in kind? Okay.
Brian, I don't think there's any disagreement with the idea that we want to, but I guess what I just want to press on is we need, great, let's have these, we need to articulate what we are trying to accomplish and what we want to present. And I think that's where my hesitation comes in. It's okay, great, hey, PIL is going to do something. Well, somebody needs to sit with PIL and tell them, what do we want them to present? I mean, we've all learned an incredible amount. We're asking to distill this down to a 10-minute presentation that then we're going to survey the people about or ask questions. And I just worry about what, that's a good start for us, but it's we have to be really conscientious then about what this 10-minute presentation is going to be. And I think it's incumbent upon us as a group. I don't think it's fair for us to just say, hey, you can't just give us a 10-minute presentation. You can give us a 10-minute presentation, forever, but it's what exactly do we want to be presented? And what are we hoping, and I think that, great, if we get four meetings on the books, we should have, what are the goals, are those meetings going to build on each other? This first meeting is going to talk about this. Is the second meeting going to get to this next level of things that we understand? Is there a depth of knowledge that we're hoping to present? Or are we just, and how does that relate to what we're hoping to accomplish out of this relative to the engagement that we're creating within the community? Because I think our goal for all of us is to make this a really positive level of engagement. That and that could swirl out of control if we don't have a really clear direction of what we want to do.
Absolutely. So my question is, so where do we go next? What should can we come up with a decision to say, we should go here, we should do this? Yes.
I would be willing to just, talk to PEL and say hey, could you throw this into said 10-minute presentation? The rest of you could just email them. It doesn't really matter who does it. I'm just saying, to me, it feels like what we all agree on is we want to share what we've learned. And so let's build that presentation, let's get it back, and then let's decide what to do with it.
I would
That's kinda how
like
I'm
some
feeling.
feedback from PEL about going into the community for their engagement. What have your experiences been in going out into the community, presenting as you've proposed?
At this phase, which is your study phase, I think it was appropriate that you're not in a position to educate. You're still being educated. So it was, the presentations were more of an inform the public of what you're doing, not where you are. What did they vote for and what did they get? And what can they expect? And that's it. This is the law we're working under. This is the process we're following. This is the stuff we've looked at. And this is the questions we're going to answer. And if we do decide to make a change, here's the process that we will follow. And end the story. 10, 12 slides. We've done it several times. But not to solicit public opinion of what you should be looking at,
Yeah, no,
because they don't know.
right.
They hired you to do that.
Right, but I think that going out into the community and providing that QR code to encourage them to watch us live or attend, I think that would be, that's kind of us informing them of how they can be more engaged.
You put the slideshow on the city's website, for that matter. You wouldn't have to do public presentations at all. The one I'm familiar with is when you do public presentations, you have to be ready for the public not to attend.
Oh,
That's-
sure.
Yeah, they may not show up. When I've done county level government study commissions, you're in all over the county. People don't show up, but the commissioners are going there, so you have to, at this level, your public relations are mostly, here's what we're doing, and trust us to what we're doing, and here's where we are. But the
Yeah.
public input is not a two-way street at this point.
No, I personally am not looking for public input. I feel it's important that we engage, that we show our faces in these communities to say this is what's going on.
Well, why don't you take the meetings on the road and actually perform in different parts of the town?
Has that happened before? Has that happened in the past?
Oh, yeah, sure. Wilkinsburg takes them all over. They go to the different churches, they go to different places. I mean, they're a traveling band. They pick themselves up and they have their meeting at different locales. And they say, you can come in and watch us work. And I'm available by Zoom. Brian Jensen, one of our colleagues, he's in the room. I attend by Zoom. Then you're exposing your work to the public in the city. So there's how many segments? 8 segments of the city?
Four
Four segments or sections? I forget
Four
what you call it.
large quadrants.
Quadrants, that's it, of course,
Different-
four
yeah,
quadrants.
Different neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Well, that's a suggestion I'm only hearing for the first
Yeah,
time.
I mean, there's no benefit inherent to this room for your work.
Okay. The only thing is that we would then need to have it, and we've talked about that part. Tony Dastra has said about us being able to stream from that location. So those are some of the things, and I think that we could arrange that if, like someone like College of Technology, Stevens College of Technology, if we could arrange something there, Franklin and Marshall, and Hack even, or something along those lines. And maybe that's a little bit outside of the city limits, but going into major organizations or something like that, having a meeting at some place that could facilitate streaming live and all of that.
Well, if Wilkinsburg records theirs. If I remember, they record theirs and put them online, or, I know they record them for their record. They record them for their record, when they're doing the meeting, because Zoom lets you do that, right?
Okay.
Well,
But if you were to record the meetings and put them on YouTube, why have live streaming? I mean,
Right.
you could come to the meeting. I know that disenfranchises 3 of the 4 quadrants, but
yeah.
please.
I think we're doing that now. We're live streaming these meetings that we have. And I don't know if the city or who's ever live streaming them has any way of letting us know how many people are watching.
Yeah.
Because that would tell us, does this work or does this not work? That's exactly what we're doing right now. So to go back to say this is how we're gonna do it, I don't know what the biggest fear is about coming out and meeting people in the public. People are gonna ask questions. That don't mean that we have to provide them with answers, but we can take note and hear. The purpose of engaging people is to hear what they're thinking. To say we're gonna have a meeting, but we're just gonna give you information, we don't wanna hear from you. You know, I understand, a lot of people are afraid, I guess, that it's gonna get crazy. I mean, I've been to city council meetings that got crazy, it didn't stop the process. I mean, things happen, I think we need to hear them. We don't have to answer them, but we can say, okay, we're gonna look into this, we're gonna find out information, we're gonna get back to you at the next meeting with answers. It don't have to be a question and an answer session, but we should be able to hear their questions. I mean, that's why we're engaging the public. So if we don't know what they're thinking, then, why are we having meetings? We need to know what they're thinking. That don't mean we have to have answers. And I think to set it up to say, oh, well, if we don't answer or it's going to go crazy, I think we're just setting our own self up to say we can't go in and have a meeting because people are going to get emotional. I'd be upset if people didn't get emotional because that's life and that's people.
I'm less concerned about the emotion and just concerned that we have a structure and we know what we're going in to talk about.
Agreed.
I agree.
I think the structure is very important, and I would also go back to something Ms. Rufo said a little bit earlier, and that's marketing the sessions, really getting the word out ahead of time. You don't want to schedule something and have no one attend. So it takes a lot of work to get the word out and market the session so that you do get the turnout that gives you the response, the feedback that you're looking for.
So we've been going on about this for a while, and I thought the suggestion that we just have the regular meeting somewhere else wasn't a bad idea. Like, that seems to also, we don't have to worry about some presentation or what we're gonna ask people. We just have the meeting. So our next meeting is, I'm just looking at the calendar, the date is October 5th, I think. So could we just have the next meeting somewhere else?
I mean, by the bylaws, absolutely. There's no rule that says we have to have them here. So if the commission wants to meet somewhere else, the requirement I would think is we would have to work through Mr. Harris to find that we would be able to do it and get it. Would that be?
Yeah, we'd be able to, so I'd be able to schedule the meetings at different locations and try to line those up.
Okay.
And of course, I have to advertise in advance where it is we're meeting.
Do you want me to see if maybe, I like the suggestion of Stevens. Maybe I could try, I have a contact there.
I'm just trying to moderate. So anybody who will do anything, I am thrilled.
So,
yes.
In order to facilitate this, to move us along on it, do we have to have a motion to say our next meeting will be at Thaddeus Stevens at 7:00, or can we just all?
No, I think by the bylaws, the chair can set the meeting. I don't think there's anything in there, if I remember, that says that we meet here. So since it's like so many other things, since it's not mentioned, it's open.
Great, I'm glad
So
we
if
did that.
we can agree with, we don't need a formal motion, we can just agree.
Question, what would our agenda look like?
What would be the
At the
normal
October
agenda?
set, if it's just gonna be a normal meeting,
Yeah.
So all we're saying, we're gonna take it to a different location. So where is the public engagement at?
Well, the public is invited to all the meetings and they can speak.
Exactly.
Well, I'll make a suggestion that we'll do the presentation before every one of these meetings, to carve out first 10 minutes, and we'll do the presentation to put everybody on the same page. It's, 7 slides, 6 slides, this is what we're doing, here's why we're here, and this is what you'll see happen in front of you. And then you move on to
Then we
public
just have
comment.
our regular meeting, have public comment, have our regular meeting.
If after approval of minutes, you do here's why you're here, public comment, and then right into your meeting. We can do that.
Since there
Right,
was,
Fred and Patty? I don't have a problem with that.
PEL, since you all have had that experience, it would be nice to hear from you with a proposed, this is what we're going to do and this is what we're going to talk about, to send to all of us so that we can see it and agree that that's what we want, because I feel like we're at a disadvantage to not meet outside of here and not have any kind of other communication. And for as much as we all have something to say and we all have ideas, I'd like us to all be able to present them regardless of the time that we're taking here to talk about it. So if it's feasible of your team to send us a proposal of this is what it would look like, this is what an agenda would look like, send it to us that we could all
Well, and as an
Agree.
agenda, you mean the
An agenda.
presentation?
Presentation.
What
Oh, yeah.
they're
Yeah,
okay.
and
yeah.
then hold our meeting.
yeah, we.
Sure.
The other presentations we want to give to you as our work to you. So, but this is going to be your work to the public. So, yeah,
Right.
you have to prove it. Yeah, we didn't get elected. Yeah, so we'll put together the slide based on what we think is important, and you can modify, through the chairman and spread it around and modify, make suggestions. Might not agree to all of them, but, you don't want it 20 slides long. But if that's the impression you want to get out to the public, yeah.
Yes.
It's your public.
And it would be in layman's terms, right? Because we're all here being
Layman's terms.
educated. Right, okay. Very good.
Haven't we done that so far?
And my
Brian,
own,
can I just, oh, I'm sorry.
no, go right ahead.
So, and just to move this forward, can
Yeah.
we suggest that you work with Bernie to set up the next 4 meetings? Know that we want one in each quadrant. I think you would know the intentions that we have.
Yep,
behind-
I'm
We
good
don't
with
need
that.
to sit here and debate where they're going to be, what's going to happen, what's available.
And
Bernie.
if any of you have,
Darlene has done some research and given Bernie several
Okay, good.
ideas of places that are willing to host us and
Yeah.
what kind of capabilities they have.
Okay, that's perfect.
but the idea, like I said, Stevens, the seminary where there was the home rule information meeting at the seminary, that is a spot in the Northwest, that might work. So, yeah. We'll try to get that going.
And I just want to express one concern. I know when we did the home rule meetings all over the city in the different quadrants, we presented the same information. So now we're going to different quadrants and we're giving people different information. We're not sharing the same information that we know. And that could concern me a little bit, depending on when in the southeast are we going to be 4 months out where we know different now that we're presenting to the northeast or the northwest.
Well, actually, I think what we've decided the approach we'd like to take is we would have a common presentation to update them on just what it is this commission is about. Not necessarily, well, last month we talked about taxes, this month we talked about municipal forms.
Okay.
And so these are the things we're talking about, even if we haven't gotten to it yet.
Right.
These are the issues we will have, and then that's how we'll make our decision sometime early in 2024.
Okay, that's good.
So we will, okay. Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
This is the list of some venues that Ms. Byrd was able to have. So we'll try to work, I'll try to work with Mr. Harrison, see if we can get that going for the next meeting and for the next few, at least for the October meeting. And then we can, if we can't get an absolute commitment for November, we hopefully we can get one for the next one, and as many as we can going forward. I like that idea. Great.
And I'll just remind us that when PEL sends us the presentation for review, we cannot do an all response, just everybody should respond back to Brian with their comments about what,
Yes,
because we cannot deliberate by email.
Yeah.
So whatever comments you have about the presentation that PEL sends us, just respond to Brian.
that's a good point. Just in keeping,
Can you remind us of that in the email?
okay. Yeah, well, I have to admit, when I get responses, I don't look at the list of who it's sent to. I just see it sent to me. So if it's sent only to me, I'm good. If it's sent to everybody, I probably didn't even notice. Okay. All right. So I think we're good. We've got something planned. Moving on. Is there anything else to add to this, or can we move on? Wonderful. After the last meeting, we developed some questionnaires for city officials, for the mayor, for the president of council, the treasurer, and the controller. I received responses from the mayor, the president of council, and the controller last week, which I have forwarded on to everybody. I'm not sure how many of you had a chance to really read through their responses. I confess that I have not. I have not heard back from the treasurer. I have contacted him again, asking for this, and have not heard back. I will try a second time. I'm not sure. I would think actually right now, my suggestion is, unless there is something specific, I personally do not have any real problem with putting the mayor on the spot if need be. If somebody has something that they, a part of the responses, otherwise, I think maybe our best use of time is to dig through these and continue on. I don't want to have a discussion where half of us haven't really read them is all. I'm not sure if that would be how valuable, worth our time right now. Any thoughts or how we should? Yes, Ms. Cook. I thought you were turning it on.
Will we have another opportunity to ask questions to the mayor if we don't do it today?
Well, that we can ask. We can invite anybody to come in and meet with us. I would hope they would agree. I would also leave open the fact that if we invite someone to come in and speak, they could also say, no, I'm not available. That's kind of their prerogative. I would think that, yes, we would have that opportunity. In fact, I would think, I would suggest that perhaps in the next meeting, if there is one or more of the people that we have sent questionnaires to that you would like follow-ups, that we could invite them to the next meeting specifically. I would ask, just as a courtesy, that we have some very specific items we want to follow up. We don't want anybody to feel like we're trying to corner them and browbeat them into something. We just want to say we'd like to discuss some, your response to this or something to that effect. And we can invite them. Others?
I think your suggestion is reasonable, that we
Okay.
table the conversation until everyone's had a chance to really review all the information. And then I think from there, if we have your suggestion of if there are specific people that we want to talk to further, if we have questions specifically for the mayor or the controller or the president of city council, that we know that, we give you that information so that you can issue an invitation to them.
Yes,
come to the
and
meeting.
like I said, I would
I think that.
I would think it would be polite to say, and these are some specific items we would like to discuss. They don't have to be, you don't have to say, I want to ask them about this, but we would like to discuss with you whatever. Sure. Others?
I read them and I found them to be valuable and interesting. So, I encourage the public to read them as well. They're on our website.
They should be posted by now. I think they are. Okay, yes, thank you. Any other comments on that?
I have a question. I've spoken to some other council members, and they're like, nobody asks us questions. Are we as commissioners allowed to ask people, especially employees, department heads, or questions about, and especially the budget and the taxation? I'm waiting for, when are we going to get into the budget? And we kind of talked over it. We got these big documents and we're not discussing it. And I'm wondering, where is that going to be along the process?
As for meeting with others, we do not have our parliamentarian here, so I'm hoping I'm not overstepping a legal aspect of this. But I would say, as an elected official, you may speak with absolutely anybody you want. So if you want to call or call up or email as an individual, as a member of the commission, you want to call somebody on council, you may do that. If you want to call somebody on the planning commission, I would argue you have that right, that you can do that. If a group of us decided we would like to contact them, now we have to deal with right to know and sunshine laws. But as an individual, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, as an elected official, that's your right. It's all, and keep in mind, it's also their right to say, I don't want to talk to you. Or refuse to answer a question. That's the other great freedom we have in this country is not to have to answer questions. But I think that's a great idea, if you have specifically. As for the one comment, a thought on what you said about that other members of council said, well, when do we have a chance? I kind of looked at that as I would have hoped that President of Council would have worked with all of council to provide these answers. I do not know what she did. I have her answers. I do not know if she met with one person, if she met with four, if she met with all of them, or if they even, how they did
Can I ask
it.
a question?
Yes.
From PEL, from your experience, how often do home rule commissions request comments from every single city council member?
I think that's up to the different commissions.
Okay.
I think you could develop a set of questions similar to the president of council and ask the council member those questions. You can give them the council president's questions that are relevant to them. But you're asking for the function of the council in the government it is. And the person that leads the council is president council. So asking the individual council people what they think of the structure and the effectiveness of the government might be useful, but you would hope it would be the same appearance as what the president council would put, because that's the leader of council. And as far as asking individuals of the commission and one-on-one with other people, you have that right as a elected person and a study commissioner, you're studying. Every right has a responsibility. If you contact an individual and you get answers, it will be your responsibility to transcribe and provide as best as you can the answer, the question and the answer to all the other commissioners. It's not a free-for-all. It's not and that's efficient because you don't have 9 people asking the same question, the same poor guy. But you have a responsibility. If you take the right, you have a responsibility to your fellow commissioners. So that's my caveat. Otherwise, you're not sharing knowledge.
Thank you.
And the budget question?
And budget, you had a question about when will we revise it, give it to us again so I can make sure, I don't want to get it wrong. You were asking about the budget.
Yeah, like when would we look at the budget? I mean, I guess like we're looking at home rule because we're saying our budget and our taxes are not going to be sufficient in the years to come. So we're looking at what, I guess our job is to be looking to see what could we do different within the budget. And, and I'm just wondering, when are we going to ask those questions?
Oh, is that,
Well, the other option that you have, and it's actually one of the agenda items that is here, is to develop questions, and we can assist with that, develop questions for key individuals, department heads primarily, that you can pose to them. That way, everyone is getting the response back, and then you can follow that up similar to, what you're talking about right now with the elected officials, that you develop that set of questions, distribute those, get their responses back. I think that may be a more efficient approach to take as opposed to individuals talking with a given person and trying to transcribe their information back.
Yeah, when we anticipated that, we were thinking department heads would get a questionnaire developed for their experiences. but it would be much more limited than it would be for elected officials or appointed officials. It would be along the lines of your role in the budget process, your lines of authority. Are you able to provide the services needed by the mechanism you have to work in? So, and that could be one page, but it will be
Right.
designed to get their opinions of how they deliver services to citizens.
Could you clarify that we're not, as the commission, our goal, our purpose is not to go line by line in the budget to figure out whether they're spending the money correctly?
No,
Our-
that's,
Our,
you're not-
our role is to hear from all of these people we decide to ask questions of. How is the function of the government working in order for you to deliver the services that the citizens are saying they want? Is that,
yeah. One of the questions we asked of the mayor, the controller, I think treasurer and the council, their role in the budget process, because the budget will be a separate standalone section of any charter you do, and you want to understand the role now, how the budget is prepared and sent through, so you can mimic it, change it, enhance it, whatever, and make it more effective and efficient. The controller said, I have no role in the budget process. Well, is that what you want? If you decide to change this, should the controller have a role? Does the controller deserve a role based on what their delineated duties are, So, yeah, we would be misleading you if you thought your job was to examine the city's budget for 2023, 2022, because that's a point in time.
That's right.
What you're doing is developing a budget for many years of time, and you're developing the parameters so that the government can respond to whatever unforeseen circumstances there are a year from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, both on an emergency basis, on a regular appropriations basis, and an ability to pay basis. That's the budget process you study, okay? By looking at the current budget, you can see what the priorities of the city are and the constraints they're working under, okay? We want to know how did they get there? Who put this all together? Did the mayor sit there one night and say, I want to do this? Did the Department of Administration send the mayor a note? Here's what you're going to pass. Did the council say, yeah, thanks a lot? Does the council have veto over it? Is there a line item veto? Is it all those things plus the operation of the budget throughout the year? But those are mechanical questions for you to set the rules of the game, how the outcome comes out. That's for the time to tell, right?
Okay.
Do you have any standard questions that would be asked of those department heads?
We have examples, yeah.
Okay.
We just did some for, I just did a bunch for Wilkinsburg, didn't I? For chief of police, we have the chief of police, we interviewed, you have chief of police, public works.
Yeah.
And they're going to be they're not going to be to the same level as the mayor because they're not elected officials.
Right.
They don't have that responsibility. They have responsibility to their project.
Or you have the 6 basic department heads under the structure. If there are others that you feel are relevant, let us know. We can develop questions according to the position.
So what I suggest is, if you could provide us with those questions that you already have for the 6, if they would correspond with Lancaster City, that would be great. And if anybody on the commission has suggestions for specifics, I can forward that on to them and ask them to look into these as well.
since Tony's not here, I will just represent him and say
Tony
that
Tony is here, but yes,
he's not
but he's not.
commenting.
Yeah.
That he wanted, I think, the city planner, I don't know what the title is.
Yeah.
To get some questions.
Thank you. Absolutely. So, Mr. Dasher, I assume you agree with that, unless we hear otherwise, we'll assume you agree. Okay. We're effectively, what we have done is gone from item 8 to item 10. But just stepping back again, are there any other comments about the questionnaire responses, what we're going to be doing for now? And then we'll go through them and decide, and each can decide if they want follow-ups, if we would like to invite specific people to come in as a follow-up to their questionnaires. The next item is we had asked PEL to provide us some questions that we could send to state elected officials. In this case, it was the two state representatives for Lancaster City and Senator Martin, as he represents the city as well. They did provide a list of 7 questions. I've looked them over. I think they would be fine to send on to them. Is there any comments, changes, suggestions? Yes, please.
I actually did have a couple edits I was hoping to make that I haven't been able to make yet, and I'm sorry if that disturbs your timeline, but the general gist of it is that the representatives, the senator, while they are members of the legislative body, they can't speak for the body itself, and so I think some of the questions that are like, are you supportive of this or not, or that's all good, but then on the things that are like, what will a Commonwealth do? Well, they don't really speak for the Commonwealth. They just are able to voice their opinion. So I think I would just try and edit those questions to make them say something along the lines of, what are you willing to do in the legislature to support us in the city? But I need to wordsmith it. So I guess I'm asking for the body to hold, if you don't mind. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Impinge it.
So in question number 3, for example, what, if anything, is the Commonwealth currently working on to address the issues of local revenue and taxes? You'd like a chance to go through and maybe just reword that a little bit.
Or you're hearing me say this now. I think you get the gist of what it is I'm hoping to see. I'd be fine approving it,
Okay.
sight unseen, with changes to get to the point, which is that the questions being asked of a legislator can't really be indicative of what the body will actually do, because they don't get to make that choice. It can only be like, what are you as a legislator willing to advocate for? And so my big, question of these legislators is, what are you willing to do for us, Lancaster City? And then, you got to work it into what you got there.
Does anybody object to that? Sort of raising, what, if anything, are you willing to advocate to address the issues of local revenue, as a legislator?
Yeah, and to add to it, if Scott Martin were to say, yes, actually, I've been thinking about this very hard, and I'm going to make sure that third-class cities have everything they ever needed, I'd be like, oh, wow, the appropriations chair of the Pennsylvania State Senate says he's going to give us everything we've ever wanted. That really kind of changes our dynamic.
Okay. I'm fine with that. Any other comments, questions? So hearing none, what I will do is put this into a form that we can send out to the 3, hopefully get that out. I'm a believer in, you don't send things out on Fridays, you send them out on Mondays. So I will try to get them out early on Monday to them, and see if we can get responses in the next few weeks from them. Keep in mind, the world moves very slowly when asked questions. Like I said, we're still trying to get answers from the treasurer. And so we will do that. With this, we've already discussed the idea of other department heads. And when it says officials to interview, effectively officials to provide questions to, that at this point, as compared to somebody to come in specifically to be interviewed. So we have that. Is there anybody other than the ones that we had discussed, the department heads? Yes.
This, I think, has been alluded to for a while. I think when we haven't discussed mayor, president, and council, and the other row officers, but and we were talking about getting something out the door on legislators, and we'll get this on department heads. At the point at which we've done that, I think it might be time to start talking to some other municipalities. I don't know how you feel about that, PEL.
I think that was in the work plan.
Yeah, that's part of the work plan, and that was the reason that the one set of slides, we provided to you so that you could take a look at those communities and pick from that listing or add to that listing as appropriate.
It seems like that's where we'd go next, is all I'm saying.
Okay, sounds good.
So is it okay that, in terms of the timing, that our next meeting, we decide which municipalities we want to talk to, or do you need that, or would you recommend we make that decision tonight?
I don't think you can make
Yeah.
it tonight.
No, I think the next meeting would be fine. I think, you can have a chance to take a look at that list. You've got a lot on your plate right now, and I think it's important you try to phase activities as you're moving forward. You're focusing on, the internal aspects of city government right now with the current responses to the questions coupled with the department head questions. You're looking at the engagement process moving forward. I think as you move later into the fall, that would be the appropriate time from a work plan to interview or to go out to other communities. So I think the next meeting would be fine to make those selections.
You might want to consider how you're going to do that. You might want to consider the number of communities you're going to pick, how many subsets of the commission will be made, so that if it took the eight, not the chairman, and two of you get a town, that's 4 towns, and you're going to do a report on those towns. In my experience, that you either go out and visit, or telephone, or survey, email, whatever, but you find out talking to the leaders of that town, and then you present back to the municipality. Every commission I've worked with, you go out and learn, and then you come back, like a field assignment, you come back and tell the commissioners what you know. And then you become sort of the expert on township form of government, your group, or the borough form of government. And this is what, the mayor of this town said, and the council president, and you'd be looking at the same kind of people that you have in Lancaster, the corresponding offices. Follow me? You're looking at comparison of forms of government.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you.
Okay, so you're suggesting that once we decide which municipalities we want to talk to, that we, as a commission, we divide those cities up among, or township, whatever they are,
Yeah.
amongst ourselves, and we go, we go individually, talk to those people, and then report back?
Yeah.
And do you suggest a particular framework for the report, or just whatever people
Yeah,
learn?
we'll work something out, but.
Okay, great.
I mean, it's up to you. If you want to keep, I guess you should keep it uniform across the different types, but, what did you learn from them? What's the relationship between legislative and executive? If there is any, what is the budget process? What is their experience with the taxation structure? What is their level of public services? Has that changed? You want to understand the good and the bad of those, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I think you can use the questionnaires that have already been developed as a good framework for questions to ask, because they're going to be appropriate to ask in the other municipalities, the same as they were to the elected officials here.
And they're comparable and analogous to Lancaster's answers, right? So you can compare them.
Okay. Any other comments? Please go ahead, please.
Does he want us to?
Not about that, but I do have information I would like to have explained to me about the water fund. If they can explain to me how that works, and I would like to know. The water fund.
The water fund, what about it? I'm sorry,
How that works, I would like to know. I know we have a reserve in the water fund, but we continue to raise taxes in the water, and I'm trying to get my head around that, and I don't understand that. So I would like to know a little bit more about that.
Well, that, you might want to talk to the head of the Public Works, I guess or the Department of Administration. I mean, there are rules that govern how you can use utility proceeds. You can't substitute them for taxes. You have to provide a fee for a service and use that fee revenue to provide the service. There's a certain amount of.
So talk to Public Works?
I think so. I mean, yeah, but.
Okay.
But the way you pose the question, to me, made my hair stand up a little bit, because why do we have money in the water fund and we're raising taxes? Well, taxes provide everything but the water fund.
Right.
The water fees provide for the water, so there better be a surplus in the water fund because of all the underground pipes and the treatment plants and the day-to-day. And taxes better provide for the day-to-day police, fire, administration on the road. There's almost a little bit of a wall there. What passes through the wall would be appropriate, but, how you said that made me a little nervous.
And
Well,
there-
I was asked that question by residents, and I'm like, I don't understand it. I will ask the question.
And typically, and I have not looked at the financing that has occurred here with the water fund, but typically there are requirements that rate structures be established and that certain reserves be established as part of any financing that is done. So that may play into, your question.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to move on. We have actually jumped into other business. I would take that as other business. Are there any other items for consideration this evening? All right, hearing none. Unless there is any pending matters, is there a motion to adjourn? There's a motion to adjourn. No need for a second. Any objection? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
What's our tasks?
Resident of the